What is that thing?
This is Appa, my flying bison.
Right, and this is Katara, my flying sister.
So I finally watched Avatar: The Last Airbender. I know, I'm like 20 years late, but I watched it. I finished it a few weeks ago, and I've barely stopped thinking about it since. The story was just so good. I get it now. I completely understand why people are obsessed with this show, why adults rewatch it, why they show it to their kids, why critics put it next to the greatest shows ever made with no asterisk and no qualifier. When it ended, I sat there for a while, and I had this feeling. If there were 1,000 more episodes of these characters just going on small adventures, no stakes, no war, nothing, I would watch every single one. That's the kind of show this is. It's not just the story, it's the people. You don't want to leave. So here's my history with it. I grew up with Avatar airing. It was on TV. I remember flipping past it, landing on an episode, and moving on to something else. Something about it didn't click for me as a kid. I genuinely don't have a good explanation for this. Looking back, it was exactly the kind of show I would have loved, but 10-year-old me made a call, and I spent the next 15 years missing it. Then I got into anime. Something rewired. I started watching shows that took storytelling seriously. Real arcs, real consequences, characters who actually changed because of what happened to them. And somewhere in that period, a friend told me something that stuck. He said Avatar is the best anime he's ever watched. I told him it's a cartoon. He said he knows, but it feels more like anime than anything American he's seen. And for him, nothing comes close. The best show across any medium, any genre, full stop. That got my attention, so I looked into it, and what I found confused me at first. Avatar doesn't just show up on lists of great animated shows, it shows up on lists of the greatest television ever made, right next to the prestige dramas that adults discuss like literature. A Nickelodeon children's show from 2005 in that company, and nobody seeming to think it was strange. I started watching, got 5 or 6 episodes in. Then exams hit, and I stopped. Did that thing where months pass and you forget to go back. A few weeks ago, my friends were talking about it again. I had time. I loaded it back up, and I couldn't stop. I watched it in a continuous stretch until the final credits rolled. I don't do that anymore. My schedule doesn't allow it, and my attention isn't that patient. But Avatar held me. Every time I thought about stopping, I just didn't. 3 weeks later, I'm still thinking about it every day. So here I am. A 12-year-old boy wakes up after being frozen in an iceberg for 100 years. He has a flying bison. He controls wind. He needs to master 4 elements and stop a war. There's penguin sledding in the first episode. That's the pitch. Here's what the show actually does with that premise. In the opening minutes, it establishes that an entire civilization was wiped out. Then it shows a father burning his own son as punishment for speaking out of turn in a war council, because the son tried to protect his soldiers, and the father saw that as weakness. Then it builds a full story arc around a government that keeps its citizens ignorant about an ongoing war using psychological conditioning and secret police. And at the center of it, a 12-year-old boy is asked to seriously consider whether he should kill someone to save the world. On Nickelodeon. I kept asking myself after finishing it, how did this get made? Because this isn't dark for the sake of being edgy. Every one of those things comes with real emotional weight. The genocide matters because it's Aang's grief. The burning matters because it's the wound Zuko carries for 3 seasons. The brainwashing matters because it's what happens when power goes completely unchecked. The show doesn't use dark themes as decoration. It uses them as the actual story. And I think I know why it works. The fantasy gives kids enough distance to feel safe. The war is someone else's war, in a world with flying bison and penguin sledding. But the grief is just teal grief. The betrayal is real betrayal. The feeling of the world asking too much of a kid who just wants to be a kid, completely real. The show quietly hits emotions that are entirely true to what children actually go through, wrapped in a world that makes them easier to hold. That's the opposite of dumbing things down. Modern stories are often scared to ask people to care sincerely. So the moment a scene tries to be genuinely emotional, something undercuts it. A joke, a sarcastic comment, a character winking at the camera. The signal is always the same. Yes, this is a feeling, but we're too cool to have it without irony. People are exhausted by that. The desire for something that just asks you to care, sincerely, without apology, is real. And it's not nostalgia. It's a response to a world that defaults to cynicism. Avatar has 0 of that ironic distance. When a scene is sad, the show sits in the sadness. When characters grieve, the camera doesn't cut away. When someone apologizes and it matters, the moment gets the space it needs. No winking, no disclaimers. Avatar somehow lets the comedy and the pain exist in the same space, without either of them feeling fake. The jokes come from who these people are, which means when you laugh, it pulls you closer to them. And when the heavy moments arrive, and they always do, they hit harder because you were laughing with these people 10 minutes ago. After I finished the show, I sat there for a while. The grief for a lost civilization, the weight of 3 seasons of wrong choices, the relief of an embrace when you thought every bridge was burned. None of those moments announced themselves. They just arrived, completely without warning. That's what sincerity looks like when it's been built right. Every time I mention this show to someone who's seen it, the conversation turns to Zuko within 30 seconds. I get it now. His arc across 3 seasons is the most carefully built redemption I've seen anywhere. And I want to be clear about why. Because great redemption arc gets said about everything, and most of them don't hold up when you actually look at them closely. Zuko is a kid who spent his whole life being taught that love has to be earned through strength. His father, Fire Lord Ozai, scarred his face in a public duel, as punishment for speaking out of turn in a war council, where Zuko had argued against sending soldiers to their deaths to be used as bait. Zuko was right. His father burned his face for being right. And instead of understanding that his father was the problem, Zuko absorbed the lesson. He wasn't strong enough, loyal enough, worthy enough. He needed to prove himself. That's the lie he builds his entire identity around. And the show spends 2 seasons showing you exactly what happens to a person who chases conditional love. He hunts the Avatar because that's what his father wants. He makes terrible decision after terrible decision because every choice runs through the same filter. Will this get my father's approval back? His uncle Iroh travels with him the whole time, loving him patiently and completely, offering a different way to understand what it means to be worth something. Zuko refuses to hear it, because hearing it would mean letting go of his father's version. And his father's version is the only foundation he's ever had. Then comes the Season 2 finale. Zuko and Iroh have been living as refugees in the Earth Kingdom, slowly building something real, and then Zuko is given a choice. Help the Avatar, or help his sister Azula retake Ba Sing Se and deliver the Avatar to Ozai. He chooses Azula, betrays his uncle, helps strike Aang down. Most redemption arcs skip this. They show the character wavering, and then at the critical moment they choose right. Zuko chooses wrong. And that's why the arc works. People don't heal in one perfect moment of clarity. It's slow, painful work. People genuinely changing still collapse back into old patterns when the wound gets pressed hard enough. That relapse is the reason the redemption feels real, because someone who fixes themselves that easily was never really broken in the first place. His homecoming is a hero's welcome. His father praises him. The honor is restored. He returns to the Fire Nation Palace as a war hero. And it's completely hollow. He sits in the war room and can't concentrate. Nightmares. Guilt that doesn't respond to logic because the guilt is accurate. He betrayed people who were starting to trust him. He betrayed the man who loved him without condition. He did all of it for approval from someone who only values usefulness. He won. He got everything he'd chased for 2 seasons. And it means nothing. Season 3 is him crawling back. He goes to each member of Team Avatar and asks for a chance. They're right not to give it immediately. He earned their distrust. So he earns his way back out through patience and consistency. Showing up, making right choices, not demanding trust until it's actually given. The scene where he goes to Iroh in prison, Zuko barely gets a syllable out before Iroh wakes and pulls him into a hug. No explanation asked for, is one of the most affecting scenes in the series. It works because it's simple and true. Iroh never needed a speech. He needed to know his nephew was still there. His firebending transformation in Season 3 is the visual proof of the whole arc. Early Zuko bends with rage. It's the same aggressive philosophy his nation was built on. Attack, overwhelm, dominate. Late Zuko draws fire from something else. Breath, life. The same ancient source as the Sun Warriors, who understood fire as a living thing rather than a weapon. His form changes. The fire warms. The element is the same. What powers it is completely different. His line to his father before walking away, "I know now that no one can give you your honor. It's something you earn for yourself by choosing to do what's right." 3 seasons of failure, 1 sentence. It lands completely because we watched every mistake that made it necessary. You can't talk about Zuko without talking about the 2 people who bracket his arc from opposite ends. Uncle Iroh is the philosophical anchor of the entire show. In a culture built on conquest and aggression, Iroh is slow. He drinks tea. He plays pai sho. He collects knickknacks at street markets and gets genuinely moved by a good cup of jasmine. In the Fire Nation's terms, he's a disappointment. The legendary general who walked away from a siege days from victory, who spent years wandering, who cries in public and seems completely unbothered by it. His backstory, revealed in Season 2, changes everything you thought you knew about him. He was the Fire Nation's most feared general. 600 days besieging Ba Sing Se, close enough to victory to name when it would arrive. Then his son died in the fighting, and Iroh walked away. From the recognition that he had been wrong about what mattered, he stopped being willing to do this. What makes him work as a mentor is that he almost never lectures Zuko directly. He offers wisdom sideways, through jokes, through non sequiturs, through acting completely uninterested in outcomes. He waits. He knows Zuko isn't ready to hear the truth, so he just stays close and models a different way of living. And when Zuko comes back to him, broken and ashamed, after the betrayal, after everything, Iroh's response is just his arms. By the finale, Iroh liberates Ba Sing Se, the city he once spent years trying to conquer. He returns with the Order of the White Lotus and frees it using the same power he once built for conquest. That's what it actually looks like when someone changes. Azula is the opposite story, and it's a devastating one. She's a prodigy, and marks her immediately as something exceptional, precise, controlled, ruthless, almost always right about the tactical situation, completely alone. Her two companions, Ty Lee and Mai, aren't really her friends. She holds the relationship together through fear and expectation. The moment she asks too much, the moment their loyalty to her conflicts with their loyalty to themselves, they walk away. She's never built a connection that didn't rest on compliance. She's never had to. Everyone around her either feared her or wanted something from her. This is what her father made her. Ozai saw both his children as tools. He favored Azula because she was the more effective weapon. He rewarded her performance, her precision, her willingness. She was never loved for who she was. She was approved of for what she could do. Her collapse in the final episodes is one of the most uncomfortable things in the series to watch. Alone in the palace, servants banished one by one because her paranoia says everyone is plotting against her. Cutting her own hair in front of a mirror with shaking hands, and her flame, that perfectly controlled blue flame, the one that always announced she was the most dangerous person in the room, turns wild and uneven. Her control disappears because she's falling apart too. She's a child destroyed by the person who was supposed to protect her. The show never says that. It doesn't need to. But there's one more thing it does with Azula that I keep thinking about. The show makes a quiet, devastating point about what Ozai's cruelty actually cost him. He deliberately set his children against each other. He rewarded Azula for outperforming Zuko. He made their relationship competitive, made Azula's success contingent on Zuko's failure. And the result is two prodigies who spent their entire childhoods unable to simply be siblings. And when I actually thought about what that cost him, tactically, strategically, I couldn't get past it. Azula is a strategic genius and the most gifted firebender of her generation. Zuko is relentless, resilient, and eventually becomes someone who inspires the loyalty of everyone around him. Together, covering each other's weaknesses, they would have been unstoppable. Team Avatar would not have won. Ozai's need to control, to pit, to condition, it cost him the one combination that could have guaranteed his victory. That's the show's final word on what cruelty does to the people who practice it. It doesn't just destroy the people around you, it destroys the things you are trying to build. Qatara gets underestimated. I want to talk about that directly, because the show talks about it directly too. There's a version of Qatara that reads as preachy, the girl who gives speeches about hope. The Ember Island Players parodies her as a weeping optimist who stops every scene for a speech about hope. It's funny. The show clearly knew how she could come across. The thing is, calling her preachy completely ignores why she became the way she is. Katara's mother was killed by the Fire Nation when Katara was a child, and after that, Katara became the mother. Not metaphorically, she actually filled that role. She took care of her older brother. She held her community together. She became the emotional anchor for everyone around her, at an age when she should have been the one being held. She's been carrying other people since she was old enough to understand what that meant. Her hope isn't innocence. It's the thing she built to survive. The event that starts the entire show, a surge of raw emotion cracking open an ancient iceberg, is Qatara and her power combining into something uncontrolled and massive. She didn't choose to do that. It came out because it had nowhere else to go. Her arc across 3 seasons mirrors the element she bends. Water is adaptive, nurturing, essential. Under pressure, it becomes ice. Under heat, it scalds. Qatara moves through all of these. She heals Aang back from the edge of death. She fights past the Northern Water Tribe's refusal to teach women combat waterbending, and that fight is worth talking about specifically, because the show doesn't give her a clean win. She arrives at the Northern Water Tribe and is told directly, women learn healing, not combat. Those are the rules. Master Pakku, the greatest waterbender alive, refuses to teach her, so she challenges him to a duel in front of everyone. He declines, because fighting a girl would be beneath him. She attacks him anyway. Self-taught, piecing together technique from years of watching others, She nearly holds her own. He doesn't eventually teach her because he recognizes her skill. He teaches her because he discovers she's the granddaughter of a woman he loved and lost decades ago. The win is complicated. She knows it. But she takes what she gets and earns everything from there on her own terms. By the time she reaches the finale, there's no asterisk on her mastery. She got there. The path was harder and messier than it should have been. She got there anyway. The show's best argument for who Qatara actually is comes in the finale. Aang is struck down by Azula's lightning. Qatara has faced this feeling before. The helplessness of watching something terrible happen and being unable to stop it. She doesn't freeze. She fights through an entire army, reaches Aang, and brings him back to life using a vial of spirit water. She used it at the moment of highest cost. 3 seasons, fully paid off. The Southern Raiders is the episode I keep coming back to most. Zuko takes Qatara to find the Fire Nation soldier who killed her mother. He knows who it was. He can find him. The episode sets itself up in a way that makes you feel exactly where it's going. Qatara finds the man, she has her moment of rage, she pulls back from the edge, she forgives him, she gives a speech about hope. That's the version the episode wants you to expect. Qatara finds him. He's old, retired, living quietly, completely diminished. She is terrifying in this scene. And then she looks at him, empty, pathetic, a shell of a person with nothing left. She liquefies the ice, lets him go, and then she says, clearly and directly, that she will never forgive him. The show doesn't punish her for this. It doesn't frame her refusal as a character flaw she'll need to work through later. Aang validates her decision not to use violence. And Qatara comes home at peace. She stopped carrying her anger toward the world. She found closure. Those are 2 separate things from forgiveness, and the show knew that. What makes this land as hard as it does is that Qatara had already watched 2 versions of this choice play out. Jet and Hama both had every justification for their rage. The Fire Nation took everything from them too, and both of them fed that hunger until it consumed them. Jet became willing to murder innocent people to punish the enemy. Hama escaped a Fire Nation prison through bloodbending, and then spent years terrorizing Fire Nation villages because the war had twisted her beyond what she'd started as. She taught Katara bloodbending, the very technique Qatara uses in this episode, and that wasn't an accident. The show drew a direct line between what Hama became and what Qatara could become. When Qatara faces the man who killed her mother, she's not just making a choice about him. She's choosing not to become what she's already seen. Closure on her own terms. The cycle stops with her. Most fiction places this expectation on victims. Forgive your abuser or you haven't really healed. This episode dismantles that completely. Qatara finds peace entirely on her own terms. She reaches closure without granting anyone absolution, and the show stands completely behind that. The final image is a quiet orange sunset. She spared him. She healed. She forgave nothing. My favorite character in the show was Sokka. I want to say that clearly, because the usual reaction to that is, really? Sokka? As if he's the consolation choice, the funny one, the one without powers. And I understand the underestimation, because the show uses him for comedy so consistently that his arc can read as an afterthought. His arc is extraordinary. Sokka spent his whole childhood believing strength meant being a warrior. When his father left to fight the war, he said something to Sokka before leaving. Being a man means being where you're needed most, and right now, that's here. He meant it as reassurance. Sokka heard it as rejection. Being left behind with the women and children while the real men went to war, that became the wound. So he spent the years after trying to be exactly the kind of man he thought his father had found him unworthy of becoming. When the show meets him, he's a teenager who turned all of that pressure into rigidity. Men are warriors. Women handle the domestic tasks. He enforces it, including on his own sister, because the alternative, admitting he's unsure of what strength actually means, is too close to that original hurt. The Kyoshi warriors change him. An all-female fighting force in full makeup beats him easily and without much effort. His pride collapses. And then the show shows you exactly who Sokka is underneath all of that. He goes to Suki, their leader, apologizes, and asks her to train him. He puts on the uniform and the makeup. He submits to learning from the people he'd dismissed. That one decision defines everything that follows. Over 3 seasons, he becomes the tactical core of Team Avatar. He plans the invasion of the Fire Nation capital. He discovers the solar eclipse that makes it possible. In the finale, he takes down the airship fleet. His creativity, his intelligence, his ability to find the angle nobody else saw, those turn out to matter as much as any bending ability in the world. His episode, Sokka's Master, is the thesis statement of the whole arc. He trains with a legendary sword master and spends the entire episode paralyzed by the feeling that he's the weak one, the only non-bender in a group of extraordinary people, holding everyone back. What the master tells him at the end? Your strength is creativity. Your strength is the willingness to learn. You don't need magic to save the world. Sokka spent 3 seasons proving it, and never stopped being funny while he did. Aang is the most misunderstood character in the show. People dismiss him as too cheerful, too simple, the least interesting person in his own story. He's 12 years old. He woke up 100 years in the future and found out that while he was frozen, the Fire Nation wiped out the air nomads. Every teacher he'd ever had, every friend, his entire culture, gone. Because he wasn't there. He wasn't there because he ran away. The Avatar role was placed on him when he was a child, and the weight of it, the destiny, the expectation, the idea that the whole world was his responsibility, was too much. He fled, and while he was gone, the thing he was supposed to prevent happened. He has to live with that. The show understood something important about why this works as a story. Trauma alone doesn't force a character to grow. What forces growth is when the character holds themselves responsible for what happened. Aang doesn't just grieve the air nomads, he blames himself for their deaths. That specific guilt, I could have stopped this and I didn't, is what makes every subsequent choice matter. And the way the show proves who Aang actually is underneath all that guilt is through a small scene most people underestimate. In Season 1, the Blue Spirit rescues him from a Fire Nation prison. They escape together. The spirit gets knocked out, and Aang realizes it's Zuko, the person who has been hunting him for months, who has endangered his friends, who saved him only to deliver him to his father. Aang could leave. Nobody would blame him. Instead, he stays, waits for Zuko to wake up, and when Zuko opens his eyes, Aang just asks if they could be friends one day. Zuko fires at him, but the question was asked. That's Aang. He extends compassion to people who have given him no reason for it, genuinely, from a place that has nothing to do with strategy or naivety. He just cannot do otherwise. The show never once treats that as weakness. And on top of that grief, the world now asks him to do something that directly contradicts who he was raised to be. The air nomads were pacifists. Their entire philosophy, their fighting style, their spirituality, their way of existing in the world was built around avoiding harm. Taking a life violated everything they believed, and the world is now telling him he has to kill the most powerful man alive to save it. The question the show is actually asking isn't whether Aang can master the 4 elements, it's whether he can carry out his mission without destroying the last remaining expression of his people's soul. The air nomads are gone. Their philosophy lives only in him, and the world wants him to give that up too. When the resolution arrives, it lands because the show spent 3 seasons making the question feel genuinely impossible. The answer comes through something ancient, something planted in the first season that you'd half forgotten about. When it appears, it feels like the only possible way out of an impossible corner, because it was. It was always there. Toph arrives in Season 2, and I loved her immediately, which surprised me. She shows up halfway through the show and becomes one of the characters I think about most. Her arc is about something I didn't expect a kid show to take seriously, learning that you need people. She was born blind into a wealthy family that treated her blindness as something to be managed. They saw fragility, so they built walls around her. They made decisions for her. They controlled her life in the name of protecting her. So she did the only thing that made sense. She built her identity entirely around not needing them. She trained in secret. She fought underground. She became one of the most powerful earthbenders alive, and she did it completely alone. Most stories would treat her blindness as the obstacle she had to overcome to reach her potential. Avatar did the opposite. Her blindness is the reason she became the strongest earthbender alive. Because she needed earthbending to see and to survive, she practiced it every waking moment. Not out of ambition, but out of necessity. Need always beats passion. The disability wasn't the thing holding her back. It was the engine. Nobody talks about how powerful she'd be if she could see, because being blind is what made her who she is. By the time Team Avatar finds her, she's so used to pushing people away that the habit is involuntary. She doesn't owe anyone anything. She doesn't ask for help. She'd sleep in a cave before admitting she needs someone to show her the way. The whole arc is about slowly learning that accepting help is strength, and then the show pays it off in the most literal way possible. Toph gets trapped in a cage of pure, processed steel. No earth nearby, no purchase point, standard earthbending completely useless. And she finds it. Microscopic particles of unrefined earth locked inside the metal. Things nobody else would have looked for. She uses them as leverage. She bends her way out. She finds the hidden strength inside the thing that was supposed to stop her. That's the whole character in one scene. The thing that finally made sense to me after finishing the show, why I felt that 1,000-episode pull, why leaving felt like a loss, is this. The plot of Avatar exists to put pressure on the relationships. The war is pressure. The quest is pressure. Strip it all away, and what remains is these people and the ways they fit together. What makes a found family work, and what most ensemble stories get wrong, is that it's not just people who like each other. It's people whose wounds and strengths fill each other's gaps. Where one person lacks, another provides. Sokka's skepticism keeps Aang's idealism from becoming naive. Aang's idealism keeps Sokka's pragmatism from turning cynical. Qatara is the emotional center, the person the group pulls toward when things break down. Toph pushes back against everything soft and makes everyone sharper for it. And Zuko, when he finally arrives, completes something the group didn't know was incomplete. He carries guilt that mirrors Aang's guilt. He carries anger that mirrors Qatara's anger. He understands the Fire Nation from the inside. Nobody else does. The group couldn't have done what they did without him, and he couldn't have become who he became without them. You can feel how intentional all of this is. You can describe the relationship between any two members of Team Avatar, Sokka and Toph, Katara and Zuko, even Zuko and Toph, probably the weakest pairing in the group. You can describe all of them because the show devoted specific episodes to building most of those individual connections. Not plot episodes, character episodes. Two people, sitting and talking, not about the mission, but about themselves. The way Zuko joins the group is the best proof of how seriously the show took this. Before he officially becomes part of Team Avatar, there are dedicated episodes that give him one-on-one time with Aang, with Sokka, and with Katara, because the writers understood Zuko doesn't feel like a member of the team until he has a real relationship with each of them. Not proximity, not shared danger, an actual connection. Until the end of the series, Zuko and Toph never got their episode, and the show makes a joke about exactly that. It knew what it had built and what was missing. That's why the finale lands the way it does. The world doesn't get saved by one chosen person acting alone. It gets saved by this exact group, each contributing the thing only they could do. Sokka's tactical genius, Toph's metal bending, Katara's mastery, Zuko's knowledge, Aang's ethics. The smile I had watching that finale wasn't just relief. It was the feeling of something being exactly right. 3 seasons of these people growing together, then the moment where all of it mattered. The Ba Sing Se arc changed how I thought about this show. Team Avatar arrives at the Earth Kingdom capital expecting safety and resources. What they find is a city with a secret, heavily segregated, controlled by a secret police force called the Dai Li, run by a man named Long Feng. The government has hidden the existence of the war completely. The citizens don't know it's happening. Anyone who mentions it gets quietly removed and brainwashed into compliance. When I looked into the real history behind this after watching, I had that feeling you get when a show reveals it was doing more than you realized. The name Dai Li is a direct reference to the head of the real Chinese nationalist secret police, known in the historical record as the Himmler of China. The brainwashing facility beneath Lake Laogai takes its name from Laodong Gaizhou, the abbreviation for the forced labor and political re-education camps used in communist China to extract compliance from dissidents. Reform through labor. The show didn't invent a scary underground prison. It pulled from real history because it was making a real point about how governments use information to stay in power. A Nickelodeon kids show. The writers didn't soften any of this. They trusted a young audience to absorb the lesson through experience, through watching it happen to characters they loved, rather than having it explained to them. When Aang finds the ruins of his home temple and discovers the skeleton of his mentor, Monk Gyatso, surrounded by the remains of Fire Nation soldiers, a monk who died fighting alone, defending children who were already gone, the show holds the image, doesn't cut away. Aang loses control completely, goes into the Avatar state, and breaks. The show holds that too. There's one more thing that made all of this possible, and it surprised me when I learned it. Nickelodeon's broadcast standards prohibited explicit gore and using character deaths as cheap stakes. Characters couldn't just be killed to create tension. And this turned into a creative advantage the writers used brilliantly. Because the show couldn't resolve conflicts through elimination, heroes had to defeat enemies through ideological conversion, psychological defeat, political imprisonment, or real internal transformation. Villains couldn't just be overpowered. They had to be understood, or changed, or left to collapse under the weight of their own choices. That forced the writing to care about whether people can genuinely change, which became the central question of the entire series. The inability to take shortcuts made the show go somewhere shortcuts can't reach. The subject matter of this show is relentless. Genocide, war crimes, abuse, the psychological destruction of children. If that's all Avatar was, it would be unwatchable. The show understood this and used comedy as a pressure valve, to remind you that these characters are still people, still young, still capable of joy in the middle of an ongoing catastrophe. Sokka carries most of it. His deadpan timing is genuinely good. The boomerang jokes, the meat obsession, the completely unearned confidence in his plans right before they fall apart. He made me laugh out loud in scenes that had no business being funny. The comedy peaks in an episode called The Ember Island Players. Late in Season 3, the characters attend a Fire Nation propaganda play that dramatizes the events of the series from their enemy's perspective. The play is terrible. Katara is a weeping optimist who stops every scene to give a speech about hope. Sokka is a clown who only cares about food. Aang, played by a woman in a high-pitched voice, is an oblivious child. Zuko gets a dramatic monologue about his honor that's exactly as overwrought as his actual Season 1 behavior was. It's one of the funniest episodes of television I've watched. And then, because this show cannot be just one thing, the episode simultaneously forces every character to look at their worst qualities right before the final battle. The comedy and the psychological reckoning happen at the same time. Neither cancels the other. They make you laugh before they make you cry. That's the order it has to happen. Creators DiMartino and Konietzko went into production with the ending already mapped. 61 episodes, 3 seasons, a pre-planned beginning, middle, and end. This is extremely rare for a children's show. Most animated series run as long as ratings justify, adding seasons without a destination until the characters lose their shape. Avatar knew where it was going before the first episode aired. The 3 seasons are called books, named after the element Aang has to master next. Book 1 moves like water, episodic, exploratory, unhurried. Book 2 holds like earth, grounded, serialized, resistant to easy resolution. Book 3 burns like fire, urgent, driven, everything accelerating toward the comet. The pacing mirrors the element. I didn't consciously notice this while watching. I felt it the whole time. The setup and payoff discipline is extraordinary. Every mechanic introduced in Season 1 comes back later. The rules of the Avatar state, the spirit world, Qatara's anger, Zuko's internal conflict. Nothing is decorative. Everything is planted because it will grow into something that matters. When the payoffs arrive, they're genuine emotional resolution. The kind where you feel the weight of everything that had to happen first. The first episode is the best proof of this. Katara and Sokka are in a boat, arguing. Through their bickering, you learn everything. The state of the world, their family history, their grief, the war. No character explains the world to another character for our benefit. Just 2 siblings fighting, and you absorb the entire premise through the side of your brain that wasn't paying attention. After it ended, that was the feeling above everything else. Everything mattered. Every scene, every detail, every planted idea. Nothing was wasted. And that includes the episodes that look like nothing is happening. Most shows use lower stakes episodes as filler, padding between plot beats, buying time, treading water until the story needs to move again. Avatar uses those episodes differently. The quieter episodes are where you find out who these people actually are when the pressure is off. Zuko working in a tea shop, the gang spending a day at a Fire Nation beach, Sokka training with a master swordsman. Nothing in the war advances. Everything in the characters does. The relationships get built in the quiet moments. That's the investment. And because those relationships are real, every high-stakes moment that follows is earned rather than manufactured. When something threatens a character you've watched in their small, everyday moments, arguing about food, trying to fit in somewhere new, sitting with their own guilt in the dark, it hits differently than a threat to a character you only know through plot. Avatar understood that. The filler episodes aren't gaps in the story. They are the story. That's why 61 episodes felt like not enough. The world of this show is built on real research, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The 4 nations are drawn from real cultures. The water tribes pull from Inuit and Yupik traditions, the clothing, the architecture, the survival practices of Arctic life. The Earth Kingdom from pre-Manchu China and Korea. Ba Sing Se mirrors the great walled imperial cities of the Han Dynasty, its class hierarchy and bureaucratic structure grounded in actual history. The Fire Nation combines imperial Japanese militarism with Southeast Asian and Egyptian architectural influences. The air nomads are built on Tibetan Buddhist and Shaolin monastic traditions, mountaintop temples, vegetarian practice, the reincarnated master found in a child. These details aren't there to signal how much research was done. A world feels real only when it has a real foundation. What the show does beyond the cultural research is show you how bending actually shaped the way these civilizations developed. Every nation built its world around what its people could do, and once you see that, the world clicks into place in a completely different way. The Northern Water Tribe has massive ice castles, huge, elaborate, architecturally impressive. The Southern Water Tribe, which lost almost all its waterbenders to Fire Nation raids over a century, lives in small igloos and basic walls. Same culture, same traditions, different levels of bending power left. The difference in their cities tells you everything about what was taken from the South without anyone having to explain it. The Earth Kingdom city of Omashu uses earthbenders to move freight crates across the entire city through a network of chutes and channels. Not because it's impressive, because it's practical. If you could move cargo across a city faster using earthbending, you'd build that into the foundation of your infrastructure. Of course you would. The air temples are all built on the tops of mountains or clinging to cliff faces. Vertically structured, difficult to reach by any normal means. Because airbenders don't fear falling. If you can catch yourself with a glider, you build your home somewhere only you can reach. The Western Air Temple is literally built underneath a cliff, hanging upside down. For anyone without airbending, it's inaccessible. For the air nomads, it's just where they live. The Fire Nation doesn't build with their element, they power things with it. Their factories, their warships, their tanks, all of it runs on fire as fuel. The show draws a direct parallel to the Industrial Revolution, and it's not subtle about it. The nation that figured out how to turn their element into an engine became the one trying to conquer the world. Bending didn't just create different fighting styles, it created different civilizations. The show understood that and built it into every frame. The most brilliant part of the world is the bending itself. Every bending style is mapped to a real Chinese martial art, choreographed with martial arts consultant Sifu Kisu. Most viewers probably never consciously register this, but you feel it. The bending looks like something real. It has weight and philosophy behind the movement, and that's because the movement actually came from somewhere. Waterbending is Tai Chi, fluid, yielding, using the opponent's energy against them. Earthbending is Hung Gar, rooted, low, absorb punishment, and hold ground. Firebending is Northern Shaolin Long Fist, aggressive, explosive, relentless forward pressure. Airbending is Bagwazong, circular footwork, constant evasion, attacking from angles the opponent never sees. When Aang fights Zuko, you're watching two completely different philosophies collide in movement. Aang circles and evades, refusing to meet force with force. Zuko drives forward, trying to overwhelm, trying to end it. I love that. The choreography is the argument before a word is spoken. And then there's Toph, who is the proof that the whole system was built with genuine care. Standard earthbending uses wide, heavy stances, massive weight shifts, feet planted hard. Toph is blind. She navigates through seismic sense, which means her feet need to stay close to her center of mass at all times to maintain constant contact with the ground. So she fights with Southern Praying Mantis style, narrower stance, higher position, rapid close-range strikes. The martial art wasn't chosen for thematic effect. Her physical reality dictated it. Her blindness shaped her bending into something completely her own. Color does real work in this show too, and I only fully realized this after I finished it and went back. The early episodes condition you to read warmth as danger, reds, oranges, and yellows consistently connected to the Fire Nation threat. And then the show slowly takes that apart. Aang wears orange robes. The Sun Warriors worship fire as life rather than weapon. Warmth stops meaning danger. It's a retraining that happens gradually, and you don't notice it until it's already done. Zuko's journey through color is the most direct version of this. Fire Nation Red as the villain, Earth Kingdom Greens and Browns as a refugee trying on another identity, Black and White as the blue spirit, the visual opposite of his own element, representing someone so fractured they're fighting against their own nature. By the finale, his fire is orange and gold, warm, alive. Azula stays blue, the most technically precise combustion possible, perfect and cold and completely without life. Composers Jeremy Zuckerman and Benjamin Wynn built the score from traditional Asian instrumentation, guzheng, pipa, percussion that sounds like it was made specifically for this world. When the right cue arrives, it doesn't translate the emotion, it carries it directly. Late in the show, Iroh sings a simple lullaby at his son's grave. No score underneath it, just his voice and a melody. I wasn't prepared for that. Most shows collapse under their own finales. Years of build-up, complex arcs, and then an ending that can't hold the weight of all of it. Avatar's 4-part finale, Sozin's Comet, holds it completely. What makes it work is how slowly it starts. The characters have the night before everything. These aren't dramatic speeches, they're just the conversations you have with people when tomorrow might be the last tomorrow. Quiet, personal. Every character gets time to sit with what's coming before the action begins. The show earns the explosion by making you feel the quiet first. When the action arrives, every character's moment is the direct expression of who 3 seasons of growth made them. Sokka's problem is tactical. He's on a fleet of Fire Nation airships with no bending, no army, and a deadline. And he solves it with creativity and improvisation, the way he's solved every problem since the show began. He commandeers an airship mid-flight and uses it to destroy the others. Classic Sokka. Toph uses metal bending. She invented it alone in a cage when there was nothing else available. And now she's bending warships out of the sky. Qatara faces Azula in a one-on-one fight that the show has been building towards since season 2. 2 people shaped by grief and loss, who responded in completely opposite ways. Qatara wins by being smarter, luring Azula into a trap that uses Azula's own aggression against her, and then she chains her down and leaves her there screaming while she goes to save Aang. Aang's resolution, his answer to how to defeat Ozai without abandoning his ethics, is the payoff of the whole show's central question. When it arrives, it doesn't feel like a cheat. It feels like the only door the show ever built, and it was always there. Iroh and Zuko's reunion is the emotional center of the finale. Everything that arc built toward arrives in one scene where very little is said. The embrace is the sentence. The world is saved by the found family as a whole, each person contributing the thing only they could contribute. One extraordinary person acting alone doesn't save anything. People who grew together, failed together, found their way to real trust. They do what none of them could do alone. That's the show's final argument. It spent 61 episodes proving it. 20 years after it aired, Avatar is still gaining new viewers, still being shown to children by parents who watched it as children, still on lists of the greatest television ever made. Most storytelling manufactures stakes and then resolves them. You're invested because the show built your investment. When it ends, the investment resolves and you move on. Clean transaction. Avatar works differently. The stakes come from questions that people actually carry around with them. What do you do when the world needs you to become someone you don't want to be? That's Aang. He spent the entire series being told to set aside the last surviving expression of his culture's soul, because the world needed the Avatar more than it needed him to stay true to who he was. What do you do with guilt for something you were too young and too frightened to prevent? That's Sokka, who stood over a failed invasion that was his plan and watched people get captured because of it. What does healing look like when forgiveness isn't on the table? That's Qatara, who found peace without granting absolution, who proved those two things were never the same. What happens to the person raised to be a weapon who never learned to be anything else? That's Azula, screaming alone in a palace, flame turning wild, everything she was built to be finally coming apart. The show takes all of these seriously and actually answers them. Katara heals without forgiving because healing and forgiveness are different things. Zuko doesn't redeem himself through a single good choice. He crawls through failure for 3 seasons and earns every inch of it. Aang finds his way out of an impossible corner by going back to something ancient and true, something that was always there waiting. And the show does all of this while being genuinely funny, genuinely warm, genuinely interested in joy. Flying bison, penguin sledding, terrible plays, bad tea impressions. Life during catastrophe still contains all of these things. The show held the catastrophe and the joy with the same sincerity. That's why the whole thing holds together. I watched Avatar for the first time 3 weeks ago. No nostalgia, no childhood connection to protect, just the show, cold. It got me completely. I cried at the scenes apparently everyone cries at. I thought about the characters between sessions. When it ended, I sat with the loss of it for a while. That's what a story does when it's built right. It doesn't just occupy the time you spend watching it. It takes up space in you. It stays. The question isn't why Avatar stayed for 20 years. It's why everything else fades.